everyone know. Here we go. All right, so let's kick off. So for those that do not know me, my name is Kate. I am the co-owner of Accepted Society and was a consultant under Accepted Consulting when we still had that business, an admissions consultant under Accepted Consulting. And I'm very, very excited to be getting back into providing admissions work under our new Accepted Society banner. So what are we going to talk through today? We are going to talk through understanding the application process. It can be incredibly complicated with a lot of moving pieces. So I'm going to set it out as seamlessly as possible. We're also then going to talk about crafting a compelling personal statement. The reason for focusing on this document is that it is something that will be applicable to majority, if not all, of the applications that a graduate student will provide, irrespective of their field or their research field or their faculty. We will then have a breakout activity, and I will talk a bit more about research proposals, letters of recommendations, CVs, interviews. We'll have a second breakout around mock interview practices, and we'll close off with a Q&A and a conclusion. So, big question, why is it important to have a strong application? Well, hopefully with a strong application, you'll be able to apply for and get accepted to not only one, but numerous programs that you have your eye set on for your graduate admissions goals. The statements that you provide or that you submit as a part of your graduate school applications are designed to provide the admissions committee with a clear indication of who you are as a candidate. Whether you're applying to a research program like a PhD or an MPhil, which may require a statement of purpose, or a taught master's program, which will likely require a personal statement, the goal in this workshop is to, or the goal in your admissions documents is to prove that you are capable and an eager applicant. Each program will be looking for different indicators of your abilities, but what this workshop will be able to help you do is to predict what to include and to revise based on what the requirements are in each application process. So, talking through the application process, there are a number of key components to a typical application. You will often have to complete an online application form or even a paper application form for some institutions. You will need to include your academic transcripts. Sometimes you will need to be able to provide standardized tests. You may need to provide a personal statement or a statement of purpose, and we'll talk through the differences of those in the next 2 or 3 slides. You will need to provide letters of recommendation, a resume or a CV, sometimes some writing samples, depending on the program, and often with your applications will come an application fee. But what separates a good statement from an excellent one is the personalization of your documents to the program or the faculty or the research program that you are applying to. It is essential that you spend the time researching your program, your potential advisor, the faculty that you're looking to go into, and any other known facts about the institution or the department. The timelines around the application process can be quite varied, but typically what you should look to do is schedule or start pulling together your documents between 12 and 18 months before your intended start date. You'll need to be really, really prepared going into your applications, as usually early decision or early action items are around November. Applications usually open around this time, which is why we're hosting this workshop. And then usually early decisions will start in November, December. Regular decision deadlines are generally around January to February. But there are some courses that will have rolling admissions where they will have applications that are accepted throughout the year. And these are all the details that you would need to pull out of the particular program or institution website that you are looking at. Specifically for international student deadlines, these are often a bit earlier, and this is to allow for things like visa processing. So definitely take a look at that if you are an international student that is looking to apply to an institution. Even more so, financial aid and scholarship deadlines often align with or precede the application deadline. So this is another thing to look out for, is that if you are applying for financial aid or funding, that your applications will need to come in a bit earlier. Another thing to just notice is that if you are required to have standardized tests, that you plan these about 3 to 6 months ahead of the application deadline. So now that you kind of have this overview of the application process, we are going to talk about crafting a personal statement. So the personal statement is your introduction to the admissions committee. It provides a glimpse into your personal connection to your work and the work that you intend to pursue as a graduate student. This is different from a statement of purpose. The statement of purpose provides a narrative to showcase your ability as a researcher. So it's far more sort of research focused than it is personal focused. The structure of each of these documents, as you can see here on the slide, also have different focuses. The personal statement focuses on you as a person and provides a space for you to exhibit who you are, whereas the statement of purpose is more on you as a student, your skills, your interest, your research, and how this is all applicable to the program that you are applying for. So focusing on the personal statement, because I think this is one of the most key documents that a lot of people don't put a lot of effort into, but which I think actually will end up pushing you, or not pushing you, will end up making you stand out amongst the crowd. The idea, as I've said, behind a personal statement is that you are giving the admissions committee a glimpse into who you are as a person. This is their only chance to know you before they get to meet you in an interview. And as I think with so many people, we're probably a lot better in person than we are on paper. So I know I certainly am. So I think the importance of the personal statement cannot be overstated. So I want to talk about some of the tips and tricks for a really strong personal statement. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the personal anecdote. So many personal statements that I've read in the past don't start off with this personal anecdote. And if you think about this from an admissions committee perspective, someone who is reading a number of these documents over and over and over again, and they're probably reading a lot of the same thing, the thing that's going to set your application apart is this personal anecdote. So if I just jump back to this slide here, you'll see that the first part of the structure is the personal anecdote, and that's what we're going to be focusing on in this part of the presentation. So how do you make that personal anecdote stand out? It's important to focus on a pivotal moment in your life. Highlight a specific experience that changed your perspective or influenced your goals, and show a particular amount of emotional depth that provides vivid details to immerse your reader. So this is the same thing as like a hook statement in a marketing plan or a opening line to a novel. It's intended to kind of bring your reader in the first instance, and it is so, so important to be able to do that. Once you've kind of focused on that pivotal moment, you need to then go a little bit deeper and explain how this moment shaped your approach to your chosen field or the humanitarian aspects of your study. And then finally, the most important thing, not only to your personal statement, but even to your statement of purpose, your research proposal, all of that is show and don't tell. Avoid things like vague descriptions or simply stating your qualifications. Rather, illustrate your experiences through concrete examples. And this is particularly important even for those of us that are non-traditional students who maybe don't have typical academic backgrounds. It is very important to then take your current experience that you have had either in your professional lives or as an independent researcher and formulate that in a particular way to show that you have the drive, the passion, the commitment to this program. And rather than just saying, I am a passionate individual, it doesn't hit in the same way. So I just want to jump back to this structure really quickly because I want to also highlight these aspects of the personal statement. Your scholarly interest or connection to the course is very dependent on your field of study. So if you are a humanities or a social science applicant, it's important to clearly define your research project and the main idea or focus there. It's also important to detail your sources and analyze your methods. You'll need to explicitly state how your research that you are proposing fills the gaps in the current literature and contributes something new to the space. For STEM applicants, however, you will need to connect your interests to the work of the specific faculty or research at the university. But you will also have to explicitly state how your research fills the gaps in the current literature and contributes something new in the space. For professional schools, this is quite different. You will need to explain what you aim to gain from the program, whether that's skills or hands-on experience, and subtly connect this to the program's strengths and discuss how the education will shape your work outside of the program and prepare you for long-term success. So, all that being said, thrown a lot of information at you guys. I'm very sorry for that in the initial instance, but I want to do our first breakout activity. So I'm going to be putting you all in little breakout rooms, and what I would love for you to do in the breakout room is to brainstorm a personal anecdote and then share this personal anecdote with the group if you feel comfortable doing so. Now, I know these breakout rooms can be a bit nerve-wracking and some people don't really like them. I am one of those people that don't like breakout rooms, but I think it's also just important to take the time to sort of breathe, settle, and take a moment to just absorb what we've been talking about thus far. So I'm going to go ahead and pop people into breakout rooms real quickly. Let's see. And I'll probably give about 15 minutes or so for this. So take some time to think about your personal anecdote. Doesn't have to be very long, 1 or 2 sentences, but it's a great way to just practice identifying what your hook statement would be in your personal statement. I'm going to create those rooms now, and you should all be added to rooms.
Kate, we all have to have an individual statement or a group statement.
The individual ones, Colleen.
All right. Thank you.
Of course. All right, everyone. Welcome back. Was that a helpful exercise? I can see some of you, so just thumbs up it if it was helpful, or come off mute and let me know what you thought. All right, welcome back, everyone. How did we find that? Was it a useful exercise? Did it make you think about what your hook might be for your personal statement? Feel free to pop your thoughts in the chat. Amazing. Useful but tough. It is tough. And that's the thing, is that I don't think
It was a really good exercise, Kate. Thank you for letting us do that.
Of course, I'm so happy. It is tough to try and think about these kind of things, but it's I'm hoping that as we kind of go through everything, even though there's a lot to consider and there's a lot to think about as you're formulating these application processes, which can be overwhelming. I really don't want to understate how overwhelming applying for graduate studies can be. There are certain portions of it that can actually be really, really fun, and I'm hoping we get to some of those in the next breakout room. But I'm really glad to see so many of you thought that it was helpful and fun, which is really, really great. Unfortunately, those that are in my study sessions know that I like to play timer roulette, but we didn't have timers on the breakout sessions. But nevertheless, we will move on to the research proposal. The research proposal is generally something I think you include, well, it's generally something you include in some like a PhD or an MPhil program. There are very few master's programs that actually require a research proposal. And in comparison to a personal statement or a statement of purpose, your research proposal is purely research based. It's like an abstract, it's very much focused on your research rather than who you are as a person or any of those sort of student or personal anecdotes that you would include in a personal statement or a statement of purpose. And as you can see from the template here on the screen, it is very, very direct. But one thing I just want to note, I'm just going to jump back to this slide again, is that in the statement of purpose, you will need to include some form of a research proposal in your statement of purpose. So I want to also note that should you be including a section of a research proposal in your statement of purpose, that section should not be more than 1 or 2 paragraphs and should definitely only equate to around 25% of your statement of purpose. But jumping back to a research proposal, and this is obviously the research proposal as an entirety in a document. Nadia, great question. Remind me of it at the end, and I'll talk about that as we go, during the Q&A section, right? So for your research proposal, you want to focus on being direct. You want to include, for research programs, you want to indicate the relevance of your project in contrast to current scholarships. This kind of lends to your question, Nadia. For programs that don't necessarily require or don't necessarily have a dissertation component or a written component, or even those that caution against coming in with a set project, it's important to still include in your research proposal your research interests and how you plan to develop your abilities and methods while in that program. In addition, you will need to discuss what interventions you're looking at, or what interventions you're looking to make in your field of study, and be explicit about your methods, your sources, your influences, your literature review. And what this does is that it exhibits to the admissions committee the kind of student you are. So instead of the statement of purpose where you're narrating yourself as a student, this research proposal is an example of the kind of research and the kind of research you as a student can provide to the admissions committee. One thing I just will say here is that I do get a lot of questions about when you put together a research proposal, are you held to that research proposal going into your program? No, often you are not. Admissions committees are very much aware of the fact that as you're going through your graduate program, be it your master's or your PhD, you are going to learn and be influenced by other methodologies or other pieces of literature. And the idea behind something like a research proposal is just that, to exhibit how you go into, or how you would approach a type of academic proposal or a type of academic document. It's to show that you know how you're thinking about it in logical steps. So actually, no, to your question, I'll just answer it now because I think it's relevant in this section. How in depth to go with a literature review for research proposal? Historiography essay. Not necessarily a bad thing that it's turning out to be a historiography essay. It's very difficult to kind of frame your start and end point when it comes to your literature review. There's obviously no way that you can include the entirety of 17th century history into a literature review, for example. But what you do want to be able to identify in your literature review is, number one, what the current literature is saying. Actually, no, let's talk about something even before that. You want to be able to show that you understand the foundational concepts that contribute to your literature review. Remember that you are speaking to a professor who is more than likely knows what these concepts are, but you want to exhibit an understanding that you know that these are the foundational concepts for your literature review. You want to identify what the current discourse around the literature is, or around the research subject is. You want to identify what gaps are available or that you have found in your study of your area. And then you want to talk about your methodology, how you are going to fill those gaps. But essentially, your literature review is basically a history lesson. You're talking about the extent of the research that you have taken to get to this point in your research proposal. I hope that makes sense. And I can obviously talk more about this in the Q&A if we need to. Just conscious of time. I don't want to keep you all here past the hour. Let's talk about letters of recommendations, CVs, and interviews, and then we'll do one last breakout, which is more fun than anything else, I promise. So for your letters of recommendation, it's really important to choose the right recommenders. You want to identify ones that you have built a good rapport with, or even ones, and this is something that one of my professors said to me, you want to identify those who may have connections to members of the faculty of the program that you're applying for. It's a bit strategic, but it's sometimes helpful to be able to put a name as a recommender who the faculty might be aware of and might be aware of their work. And so that's something to consider, and it's something to consider that if you haven't built a rapport with a faculty member or with a recommender, I would recommend trying to build that relationship now, especially if you're looking to apply for programs for next year. The way that letters of recommendation work is that you will be asked to submit names for those letters of recommendation, obviously after you've spoken to your professors, that you've put their names down as recommenders. And the institution will reach out directly. You won't actually see that recommendation. Sometimes it will be sent directly to you and you'll have to forward it on to the institution. It really just depends on the program. But you still have time to develop that rapport with a professor at this point. One thing I do want to say is if you've been in a professional environment for a while, but looking to return to academia and therefore don't have any academic recommenders at this point, my recommendation would be to look at completing some sort of short course that aligns with your study research area. And also possibly a course where you need to submit a piece of work. This way, what you're doing is you're getting a recent piece of work that could be marked by a current academic and also building a rapport with an academic recommender, even though it's through a short course. Oftentimes, when you reach out to these professors who are providing the short courses, they are very, very happy to mark your work at a particular level and also to provide a recommendation for the work that you did in that short course. So then the next step is you've identified your recommenders, you have built a great rapport with your recommenders. You'll need to reach out to them. The best way to do this is through email, and it is important to be very, very personable with that email. I have heard some people say that you should be very formal and very distant and very sort of direct with those letters. I have found the opposite to be true. In my personal experience, I find it a lot better to reach out to your recommenders with a sort of example, like I was in this course of yours and I found it really inspirational, so much so that I am looking to pursue graduate studies and I would like to be recommended by you, etc., etc. But the most important thing in that email is to provide the necessary information to your recommenders. You want to be able to provide them with plenty of information on which to base their recommendation. So I would suggest including a personal statement or even your statement of purpose in your email, as well as highlighting the goals that you want to achieve in the program that you're applying for. By providing this information to your recommender, they can then draw on that as an inspiration for writing your recommendation. I would also include, if you are reaching out to a professor who has graded your work before, I would include a copy of your essay with their grading comments. Often professors have so many people that in their class that they can't always keep names straight, and it's important to include a piece of work, particularly if you've done very well in it, to showcase that so that the recommender can pull on that information. In terms of CVs, CVs are always a tricky thing because they are very personable based on whatever experience that you are pulling from. But it is important to focus on academic achievements and research experience. If possible, include things like publications, presentations, like the Accepted Society Research Day, hashtag just saying, and conferences that you may have attended or presented at. You also want to list relevant coursework or teaching experience or any academic honors that you might have received. It's important in your CV to highlight things like your research skills and your methodologies and your tools. And to those that are coming back into academia who maybe have, or those who have professional experience, this is very important to highlight not only your work experience that maybe doesn't seem academically driven or focused, but you can reframe that personal experience, or you can reframe that professional experience to highlight particular skills and methods and tools that you have adapted that will be relevant in an academic space. Sort of basic information, it's important to organize your information chronologically with your most recent experience first. Keep your formatting clean and consistent throughout the document. Still have to say this, spell check, grammar check, all that kind of thing before you send it out. And very importantly is make sure to tailor your CV to the specific academic position or program. If you are applying to a institution that has held conferences that you've attended, you want to highlight that you attended those conferences, or that you were that you wrote a review on one of the lecturers on a paper that they presented. You want it, the more personal you can get with that CV, the better. Remembering my first quote on my first slide about how personalization will set you apart, it's the same thing with the CV, which does seem like the most sort of clinical document. The more you can personalize it, the better. And finally, you've done all your documentation, you've put it all together, you've sent it through, and now you've gotten an interview and you are absolutely dreading it. Interviews are a great opportunity for you to showcase yourself in person. So it's important to prepare for those interviews. You want to be able to discuss your research interests and your future goals, particularly within the program that you are looking to apply to. Be ready to explain why you are interested in the program. And most importantly, practice articulating your academic achievements and experiences. Whether this is having a little script that you say to yourself every morning, think of it as like a manifestation thing in the morning. Put your little academic achievements and experiences script on a post-it note and pop it on your mirror so that while you're brushing your teeth, you're practicing articulating that. You want to be able to, oh, sorry, Katie, I completely missed your question. Well, what recommendations do you have, if any, for judging what to leave on or leave off your CV when tailoring it to the program you're applying for? I think it's important. It's also important. This is more in your statement of purpose. Is a great question, Katie. It's more important in your statement of purpose to highlight where you might feel like you have a gap in your skills or your professional experiences. Your CV is mainly for highlighting your achievements. It's your report card effectively, but only for the good stuff. And I think the main thing is when you are tailoring it to just try and look at it as if you were the admissions committee. What would you like to see on the CV? Obviously, don't provide falsehoods on your CV or anything like that, but you can tailor particular things like if you have been a waiter, for instance, you will be able to say that even in your job as a waiter, you have learned to manage a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a highly stressful environment or a time pressured environment while maintaining your cool and composure. So that's an example. It's not an academic it's not an academic skill, but you're able to translate that into something that is effective no matter what industry you go into. I diverged for a second, but I hope that was helpful. What was I saying? Oh, yes. So you want to be able in your interview, you also, I mean, this is another thing, you want to prepare questions that you want to ask the faculty and the program. I know this is something that a lot of people say, The reason that it's important to prepare questions is because it shows the interviewer that you have taken the time to research the program, to research the faculty, to research the institution. And by asking sort of interesting questions about the professors or the program, it shows a sense of dedication and commitment to the program that you're applying for. Another thing to prepare is any weaknesses in your application. If there are gaps in your experience or maybe a bad mark on one particular course or things like that, be able to provide rationale or context behind those gaps that are in your application. Academics are people too, and they know that these things come to the surface and that it can happen that you will have courses that you've maybe failed, or you'll have a gap in your academic history. And as long as you're able to kind of add context or add light to those situations, it should not hinder your application or your interview process. My biggest thing, show enthusiasm and passion for your area of study. It's very, very evident when you sit down in an interview to identify those people who are genuinely passionate and driven versus those who are just applying for the sake of applying. Dress professionally and arrive early if you are having an in-person interview. And for virtual interviews, test your technology beforehand. I should have done that with the YouTube Live, but we learn. All right, so we are running a bit short of time. So if you do need to drop, please feel free to do so, but I would love to do the next breakout activity, which I talk about as a mock interview, but actually this is just going to be a really, really fun thing where I want you to answer, how does your academic background prepare you? Actually, we're going to do the other one. What skills or experiences make you a strong candidate for this program? I want you to go into the breakout room and I want you to highlight what skills or experiences make you a strong candidate for this program. Of course, Jasmine, go ahead. Mainly because I want you all to see what value you are bringing to your application. The fact that you have taken the time to sit here and listen to me ramble on for an hour is enough to say that you are prepared to take the time to make this application great. And now I want to highlight each and every single one of your achievements by highlighting what skills or experiences make you a strong candidate for the program that you're applying. Question for the what skill? Oh, thanks, Katie. I appreciate it. So I'm going to pop you all in breakout rooms. Only going to do this for like 7 minutes. Just tell everyone in the breakout room why you are great. And this will be a nice little ending for the session. Alrighty, let's do this. All right. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that was a fun way to end off this presentation. I'm going to open it up. I know we're over time. I'm sorry about that, but I think it's important to just open up some time and space for some questions that you may have. So feel free to come off mute or pop a question in the chat. You would have seen that I've asked Katie to be here with me today. Katie was also a fellow accepted society or accepted consulting admissions consultant. And I've asked her to be here specifically around community college and transfer students. It's just not something I'm very or that familiar with. So if there are any questions around that, please feel free to ask them and I will direct them over to the amazing Katie Ibsen. Yeah, I love that. Accepted members are brilliant folks with such interesting research and experiences. I totally agree. I think that's amazing. Thanks for that, Katie. Does anyone have any questions? Specific questions or any questions?
I have one that feels a little ridiculous.
Never, there's no such thing. Go right ahead, Nadia.
So I have my list of recommenders, referees that I'm looking to ask, and it just occurred to me that there is someone who's not exactly in my field, but adjacent to it, who's rather famous, if you will, that I took a course with. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, I have a better rapport with these other recommenders, but this other professor is more well known. And I'm just wondering if there would be a benefit to switching up my recommenders for the famous one versus the rapport built one. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think it's actually a fantastic question because oftentimes you will have some members of your faculty that are more well known than others. And it's always a question of, well, do I include that person opposed to the person that you actually have a relationship or rapport with? And I actually think it depends how many recommenders you are allowed to provide. If you are allowed to provide 3, for instance, then I would definitely include as your first and second recommenders the professors that you have the most rapport with. The likelihood is they'll be able to provide a letter of recommendation that is far more personalized and far more impactful to you and your application, whereas the other person may not even respond. Not for any reason, but they are just so swamped with 1,001 other things, right? But if you do get a chance to include a more well-known recommender and you know that they will respond, I would always include them as a third recommender and rather focus on your recommenders or your referees, whatever the word that you want to use, that you have more of a relationship with. They'll be able to speak to your experience more closely. Julie, oh hi Julie, lovely to see you. How candid should you be about neurodiversity on application documents, or would that be something to discuss in an interview? I think this is such a fantastic question. Katie, I'd love your thoughts on this. But I would absolutely be candid about it, particularly in your personal statement, which is the space for you to discuss sort of how, if you have found your neurodiversity to be something that you've struggled with in one instance, but actually I think there's a way to frame it in such a way that it comes across as a benefit. You know, it provides, I certainly know just from working with Katie, granted we've never studied together, but just from working with Katie, there are certain insights that she is able to deduce because of her neurodivergency that I was never able to see. But Katie, what are your thoughts on this?
It is a great question. I entirely agree with Kate that there are some advantages to being neurodiverse. I think the pitfalls are that it's still something that's largely misunderstood and still stigmatized. So I do think that it very much depends. If it is like central to your research, or if it's central to the narrative that you of your experience as a student and a scholar, then I would discuss it. But I know that not everyone feels that way about their neurodiversity or their diagnosis. And I think, I mean, of course, you don't really want to go to a place that's going to, oh my gosh, what's the word?
Hinder? No, that's not the right word.
Be prejudiced against is
Yes,
there's
yes.
a word for it. Be prejudiced
Exclude,
against,
yes.
against, you know, any neurodivergencies or disabilities that you have. But disclose, you know, so like it's kind of a fine balance. Like you don't, if you disclose it and they reject you because of that, or you know, if that does impact their view of you as a candidate, I would say you wouldn't really want to go there anyways, because they're not going to be understanding. However, I do also understand that not disclosing something like that, because it does have the potential to, I don't want to say limit your options, but still be stigmatized against, is also another thing to take into consideration. When it comes to whether or not you disclose, like I said, it depends on what your narrative is and what your research is about. And then when it comes to interviews, again, depending on your level of comfortability with it, depending on how strongly you feel about it, and again, depending on if you are okay exposing yourself, unfortunately, to that stigmatization or potential stigmatization, is really up to you, and what comfort levels or what I don't want to say sacrifices, but like that lived reality of having a disability is. In
I
my
think-
personal,
Sorry,
sorry,
didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
oh, it's okay. In my personal experiences and choices, I was late diagnosed in my undergraduate education. And when I went to go apply for my master's degree, it just didn't come up. It didn't have any relevancy to my research. And I, at that point, hadn't really figured out how it was impacting my narrative as a student. So I didn't feel it was relevant to discuss. And when you are accepted into and like start a program, there is also always room for you to make accommodations through the disability offices at your university. That way, like you can disclose it to somebody and have accommodations for it, but it doesn't have to be a conversation that you have with like your advisor or, you know, the other committee members of your PhD or master's, whichever you're doing. And again, there are advantages to having that open relationship, but it's about like kind of weighing and feeling out the opinions and approaches people have to being neurodiverse. I'm sorry, that's like a lot of context and explanation. It's just like a difficult question to answer, because it all depends on your levels of comfortability and essentially the vibes that you get from the people you'll be working with.
That's great advice. Thank you. Thanks both.
Amazing. All right, Erin, how would you recommend balancing applications for joint courses, which if you were applying to separately would be very different? This is a great question, because I know that, well, my experiences with the application market lately has been the importance of interdisciplinarity in applications, or the highlighting of interdisciplinarity in applications. I think joint courses are generally really great for this kind of opportunity, and particularly your area of interest sounds so fascinating, Erin. Oh my goodness gracious. But I think that what you would need to do when you are writing out your applications for joint courses, you need to be very, very clear and distinct about what parts of which disciplines you are pulling in, and why they either complement or resist or contrast each other, and why you have chosen that. I think it is really, really important to highlight that you are pulling in these different aspects for a joint application. But for example, you talk about the legislative impact on earlier opera. So you will my initial gut feeling is that you're going to have a sort of 50-50 split here. You're going to talk about legal history in one aspect and then the effect that it has on opera, on musicology, right? So you are almost going to have a 50-50% split. But when you are looking at your application, for instance, are you going to pull in legal methodology or legal analysis, or you're going to pull in a historical analysis? It's all these kind of things that you'll need to think about in more detail. But just from the example that you provided, I would think it's pretty much a 50-50 balance. Hopefully that's helpful. And if you'd like to talk more about it, do let me know. Is discussing your transfer experience a cliche for your personal statement? Is this for transfer applications or for graduate, specifically law school? Okay, no, I don't think it's a cliched. I don't think it's a cliche approach, Sabrina. I think it's important to bring in that experience, particularly as to why it framed your educational journey. And if it is a pivotal moment, for example, then that's absolutely fine. I don't think that is cliched in like your personal statement, your personal anecdote. I don't think it is cliched, but I think what is important is to highlight what the impact was for you personally in that situation. I really don't think it would be cliched in that sense. I hope that helps. Anything else from the group?
Yeah, I have a question. So as looking at like a lateral entry type of way, because I'm going from like apparel technical design to looking into psycholinguistics. So looking at like the fact that there's two different things, what is like the best way for someone to really prepare themselves to apply and be a very good candidate, regardless of the fact that they don't have a undergrad or any form of a background in that industry?
Fantastic question, Jazz, and exactly the same thing that I had to deal with going into the masters with, like no literature undergrad at all, but going into a master's with literature. I think this is where framing your documents in such a way as to show that you have Katie, exactly, she went from archaeology to fashion, so it happens more often than not. But this is where framing your personal documents in such a way, your personal statement, your statement of purpose, your research proposals, framing them in a very particular manner to show that even though you haven't had an undergraduate experience in what you are proposing to study, the work that you've done, the experience that you've gained, your passion, your interest, your skills, all still align to what you are hoping to apply for. I know that's a really, really broad sort of answer, but for example, I'll give you an example from my personal experience. So obviously have a law background and I was going into literature. So the thing that I focused on in my application, for instance, was my writing skills. Being able to say that I had written obviously numerous legal essays and applications and policy documents and things like that. So I knew how to write kind of coming into that. I do feel like I belabored the point a little bit because I felt like that was my only transferable skill at the time. Now that I look back on it, I think there were a lot more transferable skills that I could have looked at. But I think it's important, firstly, to showcase how even the skills and the work that you're doing now, and Jazz, I know you're doing some fantastic work in your space, just from like the writing groups and the study sessions. By showcasing that, you're not only showcasing that you have the skills and the requirements to go into this new area in terms of a lateral transfer, but you're also showing a commitment and a passion to the work that you're doing, and finding that balance in your application documents is really, really important. You don't want to have all passion with no evidence, and you don't want to have all evidence with no passion. I think it's very important to kind of derive that balance. I hope that helps a little bit.
Can I add something real quick too?
Yeah, go for it, Katie.
Yeah. Just because, I went from archaeology to fashion, while the two seem like they don't have anything in common aside from like the very little material remains that we have of textiles in the archaeological record. When I wrote my applications, I took a little bit more of a materiality approach because I knew that my skills in the materiality of archaeology would translate to the materiality of textiles. But I also didn't end up studying the materiality side of fashion in my degree. So like I think it's more about illustrating that you can see the connections between them, or that you can like identify what transferable or what skills you have that could be transferable. But just like how when you apply with a research project in mind, that's going to evolve and take shape over time, and might not look the same at the end as when you started. But it's more about like being able to identify your skills and characteristics and show that that's applicable in other places.
Yeah, 100%. Perfect. I think I'm gonna call it there. If you guys have any other questions, obviously feel free to reach out to me. I will be happy to talk through any questions that you might have in the process. But thank you all so much for being here. I do want to do a slight plug for a new program that we will be running, which is the Key to Accepted program. This will be an intensive 6-week applications course. Essentially, I will guide you through every single step of what I've kind of put through in this workshop. I will guide you through drafting every single step of your application process. And then at the end of 6 weeks, we will spend the time actually applying. Part of that 6-week process is also me doing a one-to-one review of your documentation, and also having the cohort review your documentation as well. So you get 2 sets of eyes on it. This is a whole new program. It's something that we're running, and we're going to be launching it. I believe we said the 8th of October or the 6th of October, something like that. But the waitlist registration form is on the website. And if this is something that you're interested in pursuing, please go have a look at that. It's got the full program on it. But otherwise, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you for spending the time with me. It's been really, really great. And I hope I will see you all soon in some of the study sessions while we work through your applications. All right, everyone. Thank you so much.